Hello artists, we are going to learn how to draw different types of landscapes using watercolor paint. So we're going to have watercolor paint and we're going to use different techniques. You can use a crayon, a white crayon would be awesome, or oil pastel, water, different size paint brushes, tape, and even a paper towel or a napkin, and some salt. I have some pretty cool rock salt that we can use today for making little parts of the picture. So I am going to pick different scenes to draw, and basically the perspective is like a 1-point perspective with the sky or the background, the middle ground, and the foreground. These are all words that we use for landscape art, and there's a horizon line. Each of these has a horizon line. And we always start from light to dark when we paint, and we're going to start with taping our paper while it's still dry. So we're going to use tape and make 4 different sections of the page across in the middle and even tape around the sides. And that way we'll have 4 different areas to make 4 different landscapes. On one corner you can pick any of your rectangles. I'm going to put water, just plain water, on the page. So we're doing the wet on wet process first. So I'm just going to do a lot of water on the side. And then I'm going to pick up some sky colors. So I'm going to pick up some blue. And you see how when I push it on the page, it kind of is magical. It just kind of pushes itself and moves out to where it needs to go. So I'm making the background of my paper first. And while it's still wet, I'm going to add a little bit more water to it. I'm going to take that napkin and make clouds by just kind of soaking up some of the paint onto my napkin. And you can use a Q-tip, you can use just a little bit of a napkin, even sometimes a dry paintbrush helps soak up some of the cloudiness onto the page. And I just love clouds, so I'm just going to make it a lot of texture in mine. Okay, and then for the middle ground and the horizon line, I'm going to switch to a thinner brush, and I'm going to make it a greenish color on that line because that's where the landscape is going to start. And you see I'm just mixing it with the blue to make a cool teal color. So in the background, the darker green is mixing with the blue and making like the ground far away a little darker that we can kind of see far away. And I'm just going back and forth horizontally. And then I'm going to take and wash my brush out and pick a little bit of just regular green again. And remember, I had put water on the page so it kind of blends in. But I'm going to wash off my brush again, and this time pick up some yellow, mix it and make it kind of a lighter green in the foreground or the front. And then I'm going to let this dry a little bit because I want it to look like there's the sky and then the land and then it's getting lighter. But later when it's dry, I'm going to add little tiny details like some trees and different things. I could even use a marker. But first I just want to get the foreground, middle ground, and background done. So foreground, middle ground, back. For the next picture, we're going to have a sunset behind some mountains and trees. Kind of, I guess I should put, you can't really see it, but I'm going to put half of the sunrise or sunset, just a half circle on this page. So right in the middle, I wanted it to be. But now I'm going to add water to the whole square. You still can't really see it, probably on the video, but in my eyes, I can see that the water is not sticking to it. And I have the blue from the other side of the tape coming through, so I can wash it off a little. Not a problem. Now I'm going to take some of the yellow and put it here. And if you notice, if it's watery, it will let the crayon through, but sometimes it's not watery enough. So sometimes I just have to blot it off, but I want it to be the lightest shade of yellow I can. And then I'm going to wash off my brush, add a little bit of orange, because I want it to go from yellow to orange and then to red. So I'm just going to add the orange, wash off my brush, and add some red. And then I can add some wisps of lines, like the red is kind of going into the orange. And if it has too much, I can blot it off, like, hey, this is the yellow part. Don't go in the yellow's fun. I don't know if you can hear, my dogs are playing in the background. They enjoy a good video always get really loud when I'm on video camera. Okay, so I can kind of see the yellow, and I'm kind of overlapping down here. Now the foreground is the front of the picture, and I would like to have like a mountain. It's like a purple mountain, kind of with brown. So it's on a diagonal. So I'm gonna just start with brown and make a line right here that just goes up on an angle. I could just have it go all the way up, but I want it to go back down a little bit. So in this whole area, I could have done it in pencil first, but I'm like, I'm gonna color it in. Like the sun is kind of being in the middle ground and background, and then this mountain is overlapping right in front of the sun. And I'm making it a nice purplish brown in a minute, you'll see. So this side is gonna be very light and brownish. Light brown. Now this side's the darker brown. And sometimes if we want things to be even more of a shadow, we add a color which is next to it and darker on the paint palette or color wheel. So for me, brown is next to purple and black, but I want to use purple because I just want it to be kind of a subtle shade further on the right side away from the sunshine over there. So I don't know if that makes any sense, but it's like the further away from the sun, the shadier that side of the mountain is. And then I'm going to add a little more water to even it out. And before, I made a mistake the last time I did this painting. I put the trees in and it was still wet. So it just was like muddled over there, but you can see the trees look cool when it's dry. So I'm going to wait till this dries and I say, see you in a little bit. Okay, we're going to wait to finish this mountain. So first we're going to start with a little crayon dot for the sun, and then we're going to add water across the whole page. Then we're going to grab some yellow to start with a light color. A little bit of yellow, and it probably won't take, but I can also take a little napkin, just kind of take away some of the color from the center where I wanted it. And now I'm doing exactly how I did it up here. I kind of went from yellow, washed my brush off. I'm going to move to a skinnier brush. Sometimes it's good for details. Now I'm going to add a little bit of the orange on top. It's always good to start with the lightest colors. Move your way up. And if you see, I can even just put lines of it, just lines. And then guess what? I'm going to move on, wash my brush, grab the red. Put just a few lines of red, and they just kind of blend into the next color. Maybe I want them to be a little bit darker at the top, furthest away from the sunshine, and it gets a little bit darker. And guess what? Red and blue make purple, so I'm going to put the purple in above that. And then a little bit of blue above that. I could have just put blue and had it mixed with the red, but I think I like it like that. It's like indigo. And I'm painting right onto the tape. It's pretty cool, right? Okay, so now it's blending in a little. And I kind of want a little bit of a darker shade, kind of very, very thin lines of this bluish purple, just kind of going behind it like there's a shadow from above. And I can even take a Q-tip or a napkin, again, find a good spot, and just kind of make a few lines coming through like the clouds are kind of like turning into pretty reddish tones because there is the sun kind of leaving a reflection on it. And I think I don't have enough yellow near the red, the orange and the red. I'm going to go back in and add a little bit more. And I don't even have to draw it out with crayon first. I can just take and make a circle with the yellow if it's dry enough. And then at the bottom it's going to be land, and I think I'd like it to. So I'm back. I had to steal my paintbrush back from my puppy. And I had salt at the top let's see if we can zoom in and see what happens. The salt is kind of making a texture at the top where there would be like stars in the sky. And I really didn't like how I first made this water on the page, so I decided to make it into something else. I'm putting green hills in front of the sunset, so they're overlapping in the middle ground and foreground of this picture. And I'm just going to use the wet paint that I had sitting there already on the paper, which was blue. And I'm going to look at my palette and decide, oh yeah, I'm going to just add a little bit of green to it so that it is a color that kind of goes with it. If I had added orange to it, it would have been a brown color, which would have been nice, but I kind of wanted to keep it bright. I'm going to add a little bit of the yellow to the green, and then kind of give it a texture with like diagonal lines. They're kind of going into a blue that mixes with the purple. And I like it much better now. It's like a background is the sunset, middle is these hills, and the front is like greenish and purplish grasses. For my last box, I kind of messed up, so I'm just going to go back in, add some water, maybe a little bit of blue since it was there already, add a little bit of darker blue near the top. And I'm going to make hills on this, starting from the background, and just kind of add some hills in the darkest colors first, and then move up to lighter colors. So I started with a dark purple, and I'm going to mix it with a little bit of red, just to give it some really cool effects. And then my next hills kind of overlap, so I need to make sure I choose a different color. So I picked blue mixed with purple. And you can mix it right on the paper or maybe on your palette on the side. And I just filled in a little more of that mountain so that these mountains look like the darker purplish blue ones in front of it. And then my next one I'm going to add with a little bit more of the blue, because blue and red make purple, so I like having it kind of have this really neat two primary colors mixed with their secondary color, which is the primaries are red and blue, and then purple is the secondary. And right in the front, I'm going to just add a nice hill of green, and this is going to actually be where I'm going to add some grasses to it in the front. So after the hills dry, I'm going to add lines to be like grass in the front. I can even add it with marker if I don't feel comfortable making tiny lines with a paintbrush. I can also add little dots on the tops to be like flowers in this wonderful grassy area. So for the next part, we're going to add details like trees and maybe even a boat or some birds or some bushes or flowers. So how we're going to do that right now, I'm going to use a paintbrush, a really skinny one, and I'm going to use some brown paint or purple paint or black paint. And you could use a Sharpie, a thin Sharpie, that would be cool. Because this is dry from the day before, so I can add anything with drawing techniques, pencil lines, whatever would work. I'm going to add it with paint due to the fact that that's what I have laying around, and it's kind of fun. But I'm going to make a tree far, far away on the horizon line, and I'm making the trunk on the ground, and then I'm just going to take my paintbrush with the black paint and just make the leaves, and I'm just kind of dabbing it onto there, like tap, 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 till I have a whole tree. Sometimes you can even leave kind of like a shadow on the ground where the tree might be shadowy, and it might be too much, so then of course we go back in and blot it. And also I'd like to add other things, like either with pencil first and then go in and add paint or a Sharpie over it, but I'm going to add a road. And we start for perspective, we go from very tiny to larger as we get closer to the foreground or the bottom of the picture. And so we can color things in, make it look like there's a lot of space in this picture and depth. And maybe add a few more trees or bushes. Just when you use a very thin paintbrush, you can do a good job finding things far away or super tiny with lots of less details, which is kind of cool. And the closer up you get, add more details and larger objects. And the next one, this is definitely a showing of larger objects. I'm going to draw pine trees by drawing a straight line and then just kind of pushing my paintbrush in kind of like little dots that are going diagonally in a line. So we have a lot of pine trees starting. We're going to get a little closer so you can see how it's just like these triangles that have little dots instead of straight lines coming out from the pine tree needles, and it's kind of like giving it a lot of texture, and a few little dots make it look like these are all the little pine needles making up a tree or the leaves of a tree. But we're doing this on a triangle kind of level so that we know it's a pine tree. And make sure you do this part when the picture behind it is dry. I hope this helped you figure out how to do some wonderful watercolor landscapes. I can't wait to see your creations.